Hello, we're rolling into another episode of the DRH show. As usual, in each episode, I'll be talking to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. My brilliant guest for today is a well-being expert, well-being in the workplace, and she's the founder of the company called Karma. Tania Diggory, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Okay. Tania, could you just tell us your background, tell us your trajectory in life, how you ended up setting up a company such as Karma?
Absolutely. So I've been an entrepreneur for quite a few years now. I actually ran two different businesses before launching Karma in the dance industry. So I ran a dance school for 3 years, and then I ran an international dance events company where we brought in international artists and academics and explored the history and evolution of hip hop and street dance culture. So during that time, it was a really incredible experience, lots of character building experiences as well. But there was a lot of pressure. It was very much a step up from my previous business, managing a team, working with bigger sponsors, venues, you name it. And I actually went through a lot of stress and ended up burning out, and then went through a period of having anxiety attacks quite severely on and off for about a year. So that whole experience really brought to light for me why mental health and well-being is just so important, even if you are someone who considers themselves a pretty positive person and very proactive. Like, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical and emotional health, and it's something to be nurtured and supported, because we're all human and we can all have ups and downs. So going through that experience was very much a learning curve, and it inspired me to support people to take care of their mental health and well-being as professionals. So that's when I ended up exploring the concept of Karma. So I was aware that stress and burnout was becoming an increasing issue, especially for high achievers, entrepreneurs, freelancers, people working in busy team environments. And so I wanted to create a platform that said, it's okay to struggle, and we all have ups and downs, and here's some strategies and methods that can support you and empower you to nurture good mental health and well-being in your working life.
Mm-hmm. And so who do you work with on Karma? Is it mainly companies, or do you also work with individuals?
Yeah, so we work with individuals. The heart of the business started from a very small business perspective. We're still a small business ourselves, and we really are passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and solo workers as well as business teams. But the UK economy in particular, and I think many economies around the world, are made up of a large percent of small to medium businesses. So it is really such an important part of our economy. And if your mind isn't in a great place, if your health and well-being isn't feeling right, then that can have a really direct impact on the output of your work.
Mm-hmm. And I understand also that the reason why I reach out to you is because I understand you publish a guide about working from home, which is really very relevant to what we're experiencing right now. So could you just talk us more about the guide that you publish about working remotely?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the book's, it's actually my second book. So my first book I wrote in 2017, this is Karma. And this book actually came about around 6 months ago. So around sort of October 2019 time. And it's called Working from Home, the Complete Karma Guide to Remote Working. So we'd actually, as a team, seen a real trend in the working world. And so many people, now working from home more regularly, people working remotely. And actually the Office of National Statistics cited that in 2019, it was around 8.7 million people who had experience working from home just in the UK alone. Now they've estimated, this just happens to be, following the coronavirus pandemic, it's now estimated that in the UK alone, around 20 million are working from home now. And that's roughly a third of our population. So it's a huge number. But we actually didn't create this as a reactiveness to COVID-19. So we've been developing it from last year, and it's based on over 2,000 hours of research, evidence-based research, case studies and client stories to really get to the heart of what people's experience is like working from home, and to hear real life stories of people, whether it's their challenges and struggles that they face or the things that they find, that helps them, during their working day. And so we crafted 5 steps in this working from home guide to help people, based on the 5 key areas we identified is important to focus on to ensure a happy, healthy and productive working from home experience. So especially what's going on now at the moment, we hope that it will really help and reach as many people as possible.
I think it's not only relevant for the current climate, the current experience of lockdown, because like what you've mentioned, the landscape of workplace has been totally transformed for the past decades. And I think that, after the lockdown, we'll realize that actually we can actually do a lot of things from home. So I think your guide will really be more useful and relevant. Well, what I just want to touch upon is that earlier you mentioned about positive attitude. Not a lot of people don't have positive attitude to, cope with working from home or the pressures of working in the workplace. But there's one buzzword. It's not really a buzzword, but there's one word that really keeps on coming, especially during the lockdown, is its resilience. Could you just talk to us the importance of resilience, whether in relation to lockdown or in relation to the struggles of working in such a competitive industry?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. I know what you mean. Resilience is being talked about a lot more nowadays. And I think that's perhaps also in alignment with how much awareness there is around mental health now. There's a growing awareness around it, which is great. With resilience, really, it's not just about how you bounce back from adversity and difficult situations, but it's also how you choose to adapt and what you've taken in terms of a learning experience from what you've been through. So, we all go through ups and downs, as I mentioned earlier. And, resilience, I don't believe is something that some people are born with and some people aren't. It's a life skill and it's a human skill that we can all cultivate and build and develop. And I think that it's much like, mental health good practices, mindfulness, it's a practice and it's something to return to and to nurture. So when you face challenges and when you face difficulties, it's making that conscious choice to take a step back and try and look at things from different perspectives and choosing how you want to respond. Now, I'm not saying that this is easy, far from it in certain circumstances, but it's a choice still at the end of the day. And as much as it's important to, think about how you want to respond, it's also very important to acknowledge how you feel. So, if you are feeling upset, angry, frustrated, hurt, whatever it is, feel that and embrace it rather than trying to resist it, because that can be more painful in some ways. But it's also that choosing that moment when you feel ready to bounce back and actually look at it with how am I going to adapt to this and what am I going to learn, so that next time if something like this happens again, or if I fall into difficult times, I have more skills to fall back on to help me.
And another thing that's related to resilience is I was talking to one of the experts in mental health a few weeks ago. But he mentioned something about post-traumatic growth. We don't just have the skill about being able to bounce back in the face of adversity and struggles, but sometimes we can also learn from it. We discover a sense of achievement, that we can actually do this, we can actually recover from this. It's really important that we try to harness those skills, resilience and post-traumatic growth. I think whether we're working from working for an industry or experiencing lockdown, we seem to be overwhelmed by it. Now, what I'd like to touch upon is, and Tania, you've been working with business, and I suppose you try to make them realize that it's important to invest in the well-being of staff. But don't you find it a bit difficult to convince them? Because especially if you're a startup company, you would expect entrepreneurs to invest in ways to increase productivity and to maximize revenue. So I think trying to invest in the well-being of the staff, that would take a backseat. So how do you go about explaining to them how important it is to invest in the well-being of their staff?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is that there's a very strong business case for it. So anyone that we work with or we approach or who approaches us for this kind of support, we have really strong facts, statistics and evidence to prove why it is such a critical time to support your staff's well-being. But also we have case studies where we can share, like clients that we've worked with that have seen, such a turnaround in staff morale and staff productivity and in at lower stress levels, within the space of 6 months to a year working with us long term. So there are real tangible results that we can also share with them. And, statistics like in the UK alone, there's over, and this was before COVID-19, but there was over 91 million working days lost each year due to poor mental health. So it's having a direct impact not only on staff's happiness and well-being at work, but also the bottom line for companies. So there is a direct input, when you look at well-being and actually revenue and what's driving businesses. Not only that, from our perspective as a team and as a company, we really practice what we preach. So everything that we share, we actually live by. And actually, the moment when I started taking care of my mental health and well-being in a much more, manageable and sustainable way, even though I was running businesses back then, this is the most successful business that I've run. And I do believe that there is a direct link there into how I started looking after myself whilst running a business and then managing a team, etc. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. There is, like I said before, a lot of awareness around mental health now as well, and the impact if it's not something that you're looking at, and how much that could have a detrimental effect long term.
And I understand what you're also trying to, make people realize is that it's rooted from your own personal experience. Earlier, you mentioned that you've experienced burnt out and anxiety. So I think your experience, a lot of employees could actually relate to that, whether you're working for a big company, a small company, or a freelancer yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, associate trainers who I work with too, tend to have had lived experience of having struggled with their mental health and recovered, because I think those real life stories, like you said, they do add weight, and they do add a relatable element to the training as well. And it's not just also personal experience. Of course, running a business, there has to be, a lot of background evidence and research, especially when you're mentoring or training people. So I actually got retrained as a neurolinguistic programming practitioner. I'm also a mindfulness teacher, and I trained as a mental health educator and first aider. So all of our courses actually encapsulate those methodologies, and we've created our own courses off the back of real evidence on top of our personal experience.
Tania, when I navigate your website, I understand that you also help business to leverage their relationships. Could you just explain to us how do you go about helping them achieve this?
So when you say leveraging relationships, do you mean like with their colleagues, with their clients? Yeah. So with that, I think it all encapsulates together really, so we support people with helping themselves on an individual basis, but also within that, big part of our value as a business is community and connection. So not just connecting with yourself, but connecting with others. There's an abundance of research to highlight that, we're social beings in nature, and, we do thrive on connecting with other people. It's part of how we're hardwired really as individuals. So, we educate within our courses and our training the value and the importance of connecting with other people to support your mental health as well. So when we look at businesses, from a cultural perspective, every business has their own culture. So we really break down and identify what their culture looks like at the moment, and what their, sort of happiness and satisfaction levels are looking like in that respect, and where there could be improvements made. And we found that, things like offering more flexibility, recognizing efforts and achievements, saying thank you, like the little things that actually go a really, really long way, actually help to boost morale, and they help to nurture that connection between one another as a team as well. And it just goes such a long way in the long term, and it actually helps improve retention of staff. We've seen even so people feel more likely to stay in a business or in a company longer term when they feel that they have that sense of autonomy, that they feel trusted, they feel valued, and they feel recognized for their efforts. So we do a lot of exercises and and work with people and teams to ensure that connection is nurtured.
And as a mental health practitioner, could you just give us some tips on how we could manage our anxiety?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, would it be helpful if I just broke down what anxiety really is?
Sure.
Yeah. So first and foremost, anxiety is a universal experience. Everyone that lives on Earth has experienced feeling anxious from time to time. So it is very normal. There is a big difference between feeling anxious for here and there and having an anxiety disorder. But a lot of the symptoms, that you can experience with anxiety, particularly center around physical aspects. So, there is psychological and emotional aspects as well, but you might feel typically, sort of knot in your stomach, pain sort of feeling, tightness in your chest or increased heart rate. You can experience feverish symptoms like feeling hot and cold or sweaty and shaky. You can develop aches and pains in any joints or muscles in your body. Then you can also have a lot of worrying thoughts going through your mind. Headaches can come as a result. It can affect your sleep, which then can affect how you feel the next day. So it's essentially this sense of worry. It's linked to a strong sense of worry, fear, overwhelm, but also a deepened sense perhaps of feeling out of control in a certain situation. So when you're feeling out of control, whether it's personally or professionally or external circumstances, that feeling of being out of control can escalate. But every single person, of course, is individual. So people experience anxiety in different ways. So some people will feel it very, very intensely, and some people might feel mildly anxious. So it depends on the individual. So in terms of anxiety, if you are experiencing this, an anxiety disorder, how you can look at defining that is when it starts to really impact your life on a day-to-day basis regularly, and it's more on an unconscious level. So you might not even be thinking consciously about your anxiety, but it's sort of whirring in the background like a machine. So you might be doing all these other things, but you're feeling constantly on edge. You know, you're feeling the sense of not feeling in control of your situation or your emotions, etc. So in terms of managing anxiety, I'm a huge advocate of mindfulness and mindfulness practices. And essentially what mindfulness is it helps you to cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness, not just in your mind, but in your body and in your environment too. But the key thing here is with an attitude of curiosity and kindness to yourself. So trying to move away from judgment, any self-judgment you might feel, because sometimes we can be our own worst critic, you know. So it's being kind to yourself, but just connecting with the breath first and foremost. And when I talk about connecting with the breath, so much of how we feel connects to our breathing. If you think about a time when you felt really stressed, you might feel that you're actually taking in shorter, sharper inhalations of breath that might feel quite constricted, versus a time when you remember a really happy occasion when you've been really relaxed and spending time with loved ones. Notice how your breathing is then. You know, it might feel more fluid, more relaxed. You don't even really necessarily think about it, but your body doesn't feel tense. It's not responding in that way. So the mind-body connection is incredibly interlinked, and that links to neuroscience research that has proven how the mind essentially has the power to either heal or hinder the body. So if your mind is feeling like it's wearing on overtime, the first thing you can do is connect to the breath to help you feel present and connect back to the moment, rather than chaotic thoughts that might be going on through your mind or anything else that's happened in the past or may happen in the future. So just bring yourself into the present moment. And you can do this through taking a deep inhalation of breath through the nose, and really feel it enter deep into your diaphragm, expand your lung capacity. And this will help to calm down your nervous system. So it has physical benefits instantly. And just keep repeating that, going in and out, inhale, exhale, until you start to feel that bit calmer. And then with this, what you're doing is creating space. So you're not just reacting straight away to whatever you're feeling anxious about. You're actually creating a space to, you know, pause before responding. Yeah. So, you know, if you're feeling panicked, for example, and as somebody who's experienced panic attacks in the past, you know, one of the first things you can do after breathing is actually take yourself away from wherever you are in that state, in that situation, even if it's just a little bit away. You know, go and sit somewhere else, or go speak to someone to just connect with and share and have their support, or you know, go to the window, get some fresh air, because you're shifting your state. And actually when you shift from that state, you're moving away slightly from a state of panic, you know, because if you become anchored in a state of panic, it can be very difficult to think logically, clearly. So you want to keep moving and get your body moving, breathe properly, you know, get into a different place, do something that would be a self-care habit, something that would nurture your health and well-being, something that makes you feel happy, that lifts your spirits. And yeah, so breath work, you know, getting into a space where it's a self-care environment, and think about who can help you as well, because it's not always about just trying to do things alone and figure it out by ourselves, but like I said earlier, we need each other too. So who can support you in your network?
And what about burnout? How would you differentiate between anxiety and burnout? And could you also give us some tips on how we can manage burnout?
Absolutely. So burnout is something that we're very, very passionate about educating on. And what I would say is we have a free campaign called the Reignite Project, and we've created and crafted a 10-week free e-course. This is part of what all our services are underpinned by. This is our main company campaign, and you can just sign up and receive a weekly e-course over 10 weeks that helps you with burnout prevention strategies. So if you'd like to sign up to that, anyone watching this wants to sign up, it's thisiskarma.com/reignite. We actually won an award for this last year, which we're very proud of. So, that's, I would say, take that to learn some more tips and techniques. But I'll give you an overview, of course, as well. So the differentiation between stress and burnout is the time at which you experience stress at a very high level for ongoing long periods of time that is unresolved. So that can escalate into a state of burnout. Now, our bodies aren't designed to be stressed human beings. That's not our natural state. Stress is an aspect, it's a part of the brain that is a really helpful signal to tell us when something's not right, when we're in a dangerous situation, when we feel threatened, when we need to sort something out, etc. So it can sometimes be a useful signal for you, but you need to have ebbs and flows. You can't just be in a constant state of stress for ongoing periods of time without there being a detrimental impact to your health and well-being. So it varies from person to person, of course. If you're going through that for a long periods of time, you can start to experience anxiety, because anxiety and stress can encapsulate within one another. So if you're feeling stressed for periods of time, you can start to feel quite anxious. Those symptoms can start to develop. And then if you reach a state of burnout, that's where you feel mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. It's like a car running with no fuel. There's no petrol. There's nothing to keep it going. And yet, if you then still try to keep yourself going and try to convince yourself, I'm fine, I'll just keep going, it's all good, then you may risk having a nervous breakdown, going through a state of depression or worse. So it's really so important to listen to your body, because we intuitively will know on some level. Whether we listen to it or not is another story, but it's not always easy to pick up on. But the more you tap into that deeper sense of self-awareness, as I was mentioning before regarding mindfulness activities, things like that, then you can start to recognize when things don't feel the norm for you, and when you may just need to take that step back and find that ebb and flow, so you don't stay in that constant state of stress and burnout. So I would say with burnout prevention strategies, like I say, we've got a whole host, and it's free to sign up. So please do join the Reignite Project on our website, and I hope you find the course useful.
I'll put the link on the description box. Thank you for the invitation, Tania. I'm sure some of the people watching this would be interested to give it a try. Now, you talk about anxiety, you talk about burnout. Of course, another aspect of negative aspect within the workplace is demotivation. So could you just tell us how or why employees get demotivated?
Sure. I mean, there can be many reasons, but what we've identified tends to be some of the most common is poor managerial support. Especially when you're looking at, well, no matter what size really the workplace is, culture starts from the beginning. So how you want to set up and nurture your culture as an organization is very important to focus on early on to keep your staff motivated, right? So if staff are feeling micromanaged, not supported, if they feel like they only get criticized when something goes wrong versus recognizing all the efforts that they make on a daily basis, and when they have actually done something really right and really well, that can be a huge demotivating factor. But also what we're learning and seeing through our research nowadays is just how important it is for people to experience flexibility with their work and to have a lifestyle around their work nowadays. And this is largely in part due to the internet. I mean, like you said at the beginning today, Dennis, looking at what we're going through at the moment in this pandemic, people are starting to realize how much they can get done at home. And it might be absolutely still restricting for some people, depending on the nature of their work, and some people can't work from home depending on what they do. But the people who do, or people who have typically office-based jobs or jobs when you're on a laptop or on a computer, I think it's going to be really revealing for people to recognize just how much they can get done at home. But so with that aside, more and more people now are finding that that is a priority for them. I can't remember the name, but it was a director of a company I saw in a presentation recently in an event I went to. But she quoted that back in 20 years ago, the key question that she would get asked when recruiting staff was about the company car and the salary and any bonuses, basically. Nowadays, the number one question that she gets asked hands down is about flexibility. What are the flexible benefits with this job? You know, do you have a flexible policy, flexible working policy? Whether it's, you know, having flexibility with what time you start and finish your day, as long as you get the work done, whether it's having the option to work from home. So we're finding that that means a lot more to people nowadays than other benefits to a degree. So I think that can be a huge motivating factor. So if that's really restricted and companies aren't offering that in any way, shape or form, then that can be, you know, a real issue longer term, because, you know, we've got so much more flexibility now because of being online and all of the, you know, the opportunities that presents too.
And Tania, what advice would you give to people, especially entrepreneurs who are not well prepared for how their business is developing? Because, you know, the first 3 to 5 years is crucial, because it's a period of uncertainty. You don't know whether your business or your brand is going to be successful, or when it becomes successful for such a short time, you kind of feel overwhelmed. So what's your advice for people?
So in terms of longevity in business?
No, what I'm saying, like the first 3-5 years, this is just my understanding. The first 3-5 years is really uncertain. It's crucial. It could have a big impact on your well-being. Because I'll just take myself as an example. Because the first 3-5 years, you're trying to put everything for your brand or for your company to be successful. It could become successful, or sometimes it could just be, you know, overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. So how to achieve that longevity or give yourself a best chance to? Absolutely. So thank you for clarifying. This is actually something that I reference and write about in my first book, about those first 3 to 5 years. And I absolutely agree with you. The first year, especially, it's like, you know, the expression, it's like your baby. You know, when you create a business, you've created something completely new, and you have to nurture that baby into a toddler, child, you know, through their years. And as, you know, as it's inevitable with that, you know, as a concept, you know, the baby needs a lot of support in that first year. It needs your attention. It's dependent on you completely. Then those sort of 3 years or so, it's maybe a bit bumpy. The baby might fall down and back up again, and you navigate all the different changes and challenges that come with it. And then, you know, up to that 5 years, it starts, you know, walking. It starts, you know, being more steady when it walks. It starts looking after itself a bit more. So I do think there's a lot to be said for that as a concept with businesses. I think for me, it's looking at as early on as possible how you want to set yourself up, because a trap that I see a lot of entrepreneurs fall into in particular is trying to do everything themselves, you know, from the get-go, and not actually looking at structure or strategy, you know. So I've got this passion, I've got this vision, I'm going to just do it, you know. And in a way, that's one of the most,
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, and it's so important to have that energy, because that's a certain mindset. You know, that's what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to run their own business, and I don't think that would be effective. You know, we need everybody for different roles in the working world. But the people who feel that calling to run a business themselves, they've got to be so careful about their you know, nurture their creativity, but that they don't just run away, you know, with their thoughts and passions and drive without strategy and focus, because that creative vision and big picture thinking is incredible, and it's really important to come back to and to focus in on and to nurture. But you can't run your whole business on that mindset. You know, you do also need to look at how things are managed from a technical perspective, as well as processes. You know, how are you managing your time effectively? You're one person, there's 24 hours in a day, you know, so you can't be working all the time and, you know, fulfill everything. So it's a question of prioritizing. When you are in the position to start having, you know, people come on board to support you in different ways, you know, do access your friend and family network to begin with, because it's amazing how many people want to just help, you know, and help give you that step forward, and in whatever way that they can. So always look to your support network from the beginning as well. But as you do get to that point where you can start to bring a person or people on board, you know, then understanding what you want your company culture to be like, you know, how do you run? What are your policies? What is your take on flexibility and health and well-being, and how you motivate your staff, and how do you take care of the bottom line? All of those things. But I think structure and strategy is so important from early on, so that you manage what's achievable and sustainable from that get-go. So I think it's about really shifting gears and shifting mindsets. A lot of the time you have to navigate between different mindsets, not just in the big picture thinking all the time, but actually the kind of technical aspects of it, and strategy and planning and management. So that would be my take on that.
And Tania, we talked about earlier, like what's the potential, or how the landscape of the workplace will potentially change for the next decades or the next years. But could you just give us your idea of how would the mental health and well-being in the workplace would look like in, let's say, 5 years' time?
Wow, that's a good question. I think we're already seeing a massive shift in how companies are taking mental health and well-being more seriously these days. They recognize that there is a strong business case for it. And I think that will only increase. I think that the world of work is definitely going to be different following the pandemic. Things aren't just going to go back to exactly how they were. We've shifted here, we've changed, we've gone through adapting. And as human beings, we like structure and routine. And, if we deal with sudden change, it's quite a shock to the system. So I think two extremes wouldn't necessarily fit. And actually people are going to have their eyes opened up to a slower pace of life at the moment, to what's really truly important. Hopefully people will reflect, during this time, and may want a balance. They may want to go back to certain aspects, of course, but actually with a balance of the things that they've discovered are really important to them. So this also speaks for the working world, people who run their own businesses, people who manage teams, or entrepreneurs themselves. Like you've worked from home for many years, and myself, I've also been used to it, but still it has been a very drastic shift for many people. So it helps you to really categorize and think about what's important. So I think in 5 years time, I would say that there's something to be said for how we'll come out of this, and what will we prioritize and focus on. And actually, taking care of one another is so important. And we're focusing at the moment, aren't we, so much on health. It's like people's health is the absolute most vitally important thing, because if you don't have healthy employees, healthy people, in your company, so talking from a company perspective here, obviously health is important overall, but if you don't have healthy employees, then you don't have people, helping nurture and grow your business. If you're not feeling at your best, it's going to have an impact on your work. So, you do need to absolutely take care of people first and foremost. So I do see it escalating. I do see it building. And I think that in 5 years from now, we're going to see a very strong focus on
And I think a good thing you mentioned about, there's really an increased awareness about, the importance of well-being and mental health within the workplace. And I think also I would see like an increase in apps and, people such as yourself, companies such as yourself, we're trying to minimize the negative impact of the challenges of working. Just a slightly different question. I understand you're really passionate about promoting good well-being in the workplace, but I'm just interested, what are your other interests?
Oh, well, I'm a very creative person, so I do love to come up with ideas and, and see them through. So I love running events. I know that's part of the work I do anyway, but, it's been part of what I've loved to do for many years. But, in my background, I love dancing. I think creativity comes in many forms, and I believe we're all creative in our own ways. So I really love taking time to tap into creativity. I'm an artist as well, and I find that really feeds my, my creative ideas too. But also, films, music, tapping into that, and like nurturing well-being initiatives such as self-care habits like yoga, going for really nice long walks, taking care of yourself. And something I talk about in my book is about setting your first hour of the day. Like, how do you want to design your first hour of the day, especially if you're working from home, right, and you're not commuting, if you were commuting before, etc. So what can you do to actually set yourself in the right mindset in that first hour? But yeah, that's just some things I love to do as well.
And I always ask this question to my guests: what's one thing about mental health or well-being that we don't really talk a lot about, but we should be talking a lot more?
Good question. For me, I think it's the term good mental health.
Mhm.
I think that we can be talking about that a lot more. I think as much as it's great that we've grown an awareness of mental health
Mhm.
and it's talked about a lot more and it's understood more, I think there's still a large focus on poor mental health.
Mhm.
Now, of course, that's really important, and we do need to understand what is the difference between stress and burnout and when it could become a mental health problem, the differences in mild, poor mental health issues versus severe, and what to do about it, how to get help, how to get support. And there are a range of amazing organizations, that treat mental health problems and issues fantastically well in our country and around the world. But I think that there's not enough emphasis on talking about what good mental health means, because there's still a stigma attached to mental health. And because we tend to hear a lot more stories, whether it's in the media or otherwise, about mental health problems, mental health issues, struggles with mental health, statistics on poor mental health. What about good mental health? And how can we nurture that? It's a scale. It's like a sliding scale. We all fluctuate on that scale of how we feel in our mind, in our body, emotion, etc. So I would like to hear more, and that's what we try to push forward as a message at Karma, about what good mental health means.
Brilliant message. And as my final question, what's in the pipeline? You have your books, but do you have any upcoming webinars?
So yes, the working from home guide has just been released. So, please do feel free to check that out on our website. And we have just adapted our services to offer even more remote training opportunities. So we are working on new webinars at the moment. I've just actually done a few. So we're in the planning stage at the moment. But, do check out our What We Offer page on our website. That shows our different training packages. And we also have events that we do, and we will be doing webinars coming up, and hopefully feature lovely people like yourself, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah, well, Tania, it's been an insightful conversation with you. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise, and I look forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure as always, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching.